Wild child found on island off Cuba. Her hair hung down to her feet and she was covered with seaweed. She acted more like an animal than a human, making a high-pitched cry. The child either couldn't or wouldn't respond to efforts to communicate in any language. Her height and body development suggest a girl somewhere between the ages of 11 and 16 years. Mila, the name given to her by the Coast Guard crew, is definitely human, but there's something about her. Something wild. The Immigration and Naturalization Service, the Bahamian, Haitian, and Cuban governments, and a team of medical specialists working under grants issued by the National Institute of Mental Health are disputing custody of the newly discovered wild child, the second such discovery in as many months. According to Dr. Elizabeth Beck, a research professor of cognitive and neural systems at Boston University, feral children are an invaluable resource for studying the role language and socialization play in the making of a human being. Beck has designed a unique facility at the Charles River campus to stimulate a human response in these children. She attributes the public's interest in them to the fact that wild children have much to teach us about ourselves. These quotes come not from a reputable news article, but rather from the opening of a book that changed my childhood, The Music of Dolphins by Karen Hesse. Its story focuses on Mila, a human girl who was raised by dolphins, only to be captured and experimented upon by the American government. It did not mean to be about autism, but it was to me. I was diagnosed at age 4, which resulted in a childhood of countless questions. Doctors wanted to measure everything about me, from my handwriting to my breathing patterns. I figured surely these visits were standard as a checkup, something everyone my age underwent, until I noticed it was never depicted in books. Disabled characters occasionally appeared in my English curriculum, but I never identified with them. You weren't supposed to. These books were for the audiences their non-disabled narrators, typically a jealous sibling or confused classmate who develops into the disabled character's savior, represented. They contained autistic cutouts, not autistic characters, who existed to be learning tools with no personality beyond their symptoms. The Music of Dolphins was different. Not one page of it mentioned autism, yet I found it on all of them. I found a girl who had this really weird way of moving, like the ground was rolling under her feet. Wobbling across moving platforms in occupational therapy, I gained incomparable sea legs, because my world was always unsteady. I found a girl who, when her heart goes very loud inside of her and she cannot make words, turns to animal cries instead. A hiss or howl can be preferable to I feel or the emotion wheel when I don't have the strength for details, only distress. I found a girl who had been taught that her worth was dependent upon what others could learn about themselves from her. I saw myself. The first scene from Mila's point of view consists of her having to match words to pictures on cards. There are pictures of girls, pictures of boys, pictures of dolphins. Good dolphin. I like to see the picture of the dolphin. A researcher asks her whether she is a girl or a dolphin. She eagerly points to the sleek gray beast, but they disagree. They hold up a mirror to her and ask her again, girl or dolphin? She feels dolphin, but is supposed to say girl. They've already decided that's the correct answer. What's being measured is not her truth, but how effectively she can parrot their views. Often when I am asked for my opinion, I can tell I've given the wrong one. I've provided honesty where someone wanted affirmation, and being autistic, it can be hard for me to tell when one wants one or the other. But asking them to clarify usually guarantees a negative reaction. In terms of my negative reactions, teachers used to ask me to rank the severity of how a situation felt to me on a 5-point scale. Only then to scold, no, this isn't a 4, this is a 2, and you need to act accordingly. But who are they to judge how I should feel? They didn't have my experiences or my sensitivity to stimulation. What they did have was power. Mila says girl. That's what will please the researchers. She doesn't like upsetting them. As she improves, they make the tasks harder. They say I learn fast. They say I can catch up with others my age before long. Good. I want to catch up. I want to be with others. Mila lives in a house with her primary researcher, Dr. Beck, Dr. Beck's son Justin, and another feral child named Shay. Shay is a soft hair girl. Shay is a big eyes girl. Shay is a little girl. Shay barely speaks. She ignores the doctors. But Mila can hear Shay with no words. While Justin has been aloof and hard to communicate with, Mila's connection with Shay is immediate. They are not perfectly alike. The pool that Mila loves to swim in, Shay finds overstimulating, but they recognize that they have much more in common with one another than they do with their researchers. Autism exists on a spectrum, so the way that each of us experience it varies, but there is a certain kinship having it can bring. Sometimes different people's symptoms clash. For example, when one person is sensitive to noise, but another has trouble controlling their voice. But in autistic spaces, we try to compromise with and accommodate one another. Mila tries to talk with Shay the way she would with a dolphin, and while Shay doesn't understand, it does make her laugh. That's enough for Mila, until Dr. Beck intervenes, ordering them to only speak in English from now on. No more dolphin noises. The doctors are only interested in communication that they can monitor. My grandma used to bring me to a playgroup for neurodivergent kids. Each week, I would play the exact same board game with the exact same girl, following the exact same steps. If one of us ever messed up our pattern by putting a piece in the wrong place, this was devastating. When the supervisor caught on to what we were doing, she told us that from now on, we had to play a different game with a different person each week. No more patterns, no more reliability. To her, what we'd been doing didn't count as play. But would you say someone isn't singing just because they've performed that song before? Sure, to an outsider, this might have seemed repetitive, but to us, it was a ritual that represented our bond, something that remained reassuringly consistent when things around us were constantly changing. We'd enjoyed that first unscripted game so much that every week we wanted to recreate it, but to our supervisor, this wasn't progress. The true goal of this group hadn't been to practice making friends, but neurotypical friends in particular. A neurotypical person could not be expected to follow the steps of our dance. Even when they weren't around us, we were supposed to practice theirs. Autistic people can communicate in ways that others find jarring. We are often blunter, repeat ourselves, and rely differently on body language. While in neurotypical spaces, going on and on about one's interests without giving anyone else a chance to speak is often considered rude. In autistic communities, we call this info dumping, and it's often a form of bonding. This topic interests us, and we're hoping that you'll find it interesting too, so then we can be interested in it together. We call these topics special interests, or spins for short. One of mine is the Pokemon Whooper. The book is named after Mila's, music and dolphins. Special interests aren't mere means of entertainment, they're lenses through which we view the world. To Mila, it is all music. She loves the sea because the sea is living music. When she feels a strong emotion, she is so full of music. She can sense a song in any sound, and sound is everywhere. Inside me, outside me, she's never without it. There's always a whooper lurking somewhere in the marshes of my mind. To me, the color of this watch isn't just blue, it is whooper blue. My dog doesn't just have a tongue, she has a tongue like a whooper. Every song in my Spotify is actually about whooper, even if the artists didn't realize it. And anytime my thoughts begin to wander, before long they inevitably reach whooper. Our spins are part of our identities. In my mostly autistic workplace, it isn't uncommon to hear introductions like, "Hi, my name's Joshitha, and my spin's Genshin Impact," or "Hey, my name's Emmett, and my special interest is Leon Kennedy." I have a friend who decided to express their special interest in cars by renaming themselves after their favorite type. Mila's name means miracle, a concept she initially struggles to understand. She's told she is one simply for surviving so long. When Mila asks herself what she is, she thinks of all the sounds she grew up with. Music reminds her of those years within the sea. If she is a miracle, then it's only because music has been one for her. Our spins can be addicting. They often drive every other thought from our mind and engage every cell in our body. Mila says, "I feel the music inside me." It says something more than just the notes, just the sounds. It is hearing with more than the ears. When I hold this whooper plush, I feel it not only in my hands, but in my heart. I feel it holding me in return. Sometimes as I'm falling asleep, my mind wanders to whooper, and it gets me so excited that I need to change back out of my pajamas into my outside clothes and go pace for a walk in the woods. Mila describes this as being full of music and also struggles to sleep when it occurs. Dr. Beck confronts her, saying the noises she makes all night are keeping everyone up when they need to be resting. That's the thing about special interests. They can be overwhelming. I want to play music day and night. When I'm not playing, I feel a tightness inside me, like when the seagrass catches my feet and I cannot break free. All around me swims the big music, but I'm trapped inside the seagrass of my little notes. To Mila, music isn't just the songs of human singers, but the sounds of nature as well. Her researchers give her a cassette of whale recordings and she is elated. Hearing their songs make her feel like she's home again. Then they take the tapes from her. The songs become a tool to barter with. Dr. Beck tells her that from now on she has to earn the whale song by completing the work expected of her within a certain time frame. My parents used to bribe me with Pokemon cards. If I spent the whole week following the therapist's instructions without complaining and I could beat my previous high score, then I would get a pack. If I was lucky, there would be a whooper inside. Usually, there wasn't. At least Mila knew what she was getting. Mila is instructed to keep a journal. Dr. Beck tells her that it is very beautiful, very important. Mila's writing is good for science. But it's not enough. The card matching game is not enough. Even when Mila meets a deadline and earns back the whale song, it is only temporary. Dr. Beck always wants more. Dr. Beck begins to remind Mila of an orca who is so dangerous when he is hungry. She thinks for one moment that Dr. Beck is hungry to eat her. She is. Many researchers are. They hunger for some grand new theory, test, or diagnosis their name can be immortalized through. They see the disabled people they work with as Helen Kellers they can play Anne Sullivan with, and eventually get praise for translating. Dr. Beck tells Mila, "If you could teach us, there's nothing more important you could do." By being researchable, you prove your worth. You prove that you are an asset rather than an albatross, not one of those disabled people who everyone's uncomfortable around, but the sort that can help doctors fix them. Dr. Beck teaches Mila about Mozart, the prodigy whose music was so sensational that we still talk about him today. That's what we're doing here, Mila. You and me. We're making something that will last beyond us. But in this metaphor, Mila is not Mozart. She's the music that Dr. Beck conducts. Name even one of the children Hans Asperger experimented upon. Over 700 of them were killed under his care, and he's the one that Asperger's syndrome, a now defunct subdiagnosis of autism, was named after. My name does not appear in any of the studies my parents placed me in. Legally, it can't. The only names that remain unchanged are those of the researchers. It's theirs who will be remembered. Don't worry. I'll remember everything else about them too. I mostly remember them not listening, them not respecting me, them treating me, to quote Mila, the way a dolphin does a piece of garbage floating on the sea. A thing to play with, a thing to drag and toss around, but in the end, a thing to leave behind. I don't think they thought of me as someone who would continue to exist after their studies had concluded. As I make this video, I am already anticipating a type of comment going, "Well, you don't seem autistic." And I don't know which are gonna hurt worse. The ones that say it as an accusation or that mean it as a compliment. First of all, there are thousands of ways that someone can be autistic. It is a spectrum after all. And because of that, only some of us are going to match societal expectations of what autism is supposed to look like, because in general, society has a very limited view of autism. Secondly, as a child, I did exhibit a lot more of the stereotypically autistic traits. But because of the stigma surrounding them, and because they were seen as undesirable, I was put in programs that punished me for exhibiting them. One of the things they wanted me to stop doing was stimming. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines stimming as a self-stimulatory behavior that is marked by a repetitive action or movement of the body. We engage in these to calm ourselves, release nervous energy, or express emotion. It can take all sorts of forms from flapping, clapping, snapping, and tapping. One of the ways that I stim is by rocking my torso back and forth, and in chapters 10 and 41 we see Shay doing the same to calm herself. What Mila describes as splashing her arms reads to me as one of the most common stims, hand flapping. She makes swimming movements even outside of the water in response to noises that make her insides hum. In Mila's first appearance, she makes a high-pitched cry like a seagull, and throughout the book is shown mimicking the sounds of the animals she grew up with. Autistic people do something similar known as echolalia, a verbal form of stimming where we repeat sounds and phrases that we've heard from others. As a child, I echolaliated mostly with animal noises. Stimming can be super noticeable, like if someone's waving their hands in circles or jumping up and down, but it can also be really subtle. One of the ways I usually stim is by fiddling with this watch I showed earlier. This watch is one of my comfort objects, which is an item that an autistic person likes to have with them to stim with, and also just to ground them and provide consistency from one moment to the next. Mila is shown to have two comfort objects, her rain boots and her recorder, both of which she loves so much that she sleeps with them. She likes her boots because they can be with her both in and out of the water, and when she rubs them together, they sound like a dolphin. When the doctors gift her a recorder, she can stim both by playing and stroking it. When she plays, she can feel the notes rubbing against each other inside the recorder and inside herself. Mila insists on showing it to Shay, sharing the stim of the vibrations by touching the recorder to Shay's cheek, letting her breath stir Shay's hair. But the eyes of Shay are empty. Shay is not inside here. I stroke the hand of Shay. I stroke the face of Shay. Shay? Come back. Shay hasn't been progressing at the same rate as Mila. Making progress is when I talk words. Making progress is when I write on the computer, wear clothes, sleep in a bed, eat the dead fish. Shay does not like the computer. Shay says only little words. Shay talks in a little voice not easy to hear. Now that Mila and Shay are at different developmental levels, they work together less and less. Not everyone Mila works with lives at the house. There's a woman named Sandy who comes during the day but leaves every night to be with her family. Mila asks, "What is family?" Family is people you love and care for. People who love and care for you. We are family. Yes, we are family. But I have another family. I have another family too! Dolphin family! Can they see me again? Sandy! Can the dolphins see me again? A few nights later, Mila looks out her window and sings to soothe herself. A gray song, a little Mila song. Not big, not many voices. Only one voice. A song of alone. She can see the river from where she is and knows that somewhere at one end of it is the ocean, and in the ocean are her dolphins. The doctors hadn't thought to lock the doors. Mila leaves the house and wades into the water. She starts to swim, squeaking her dolphin name as she goes, but there is no response. She keeps swimming and swimming, but there is no mother here. I am lost. For most of my childhood, I didn't have anywhere to escape to. No sea at the end of a river that promised sanctuary. There were multiple moments when I'd wanted to run away, but where would I have run to? The only communities I knew of where I'd be accepted rather than assimilated existed only in books. So, books became my greatest comfort. When I found the music of dolphins on a library shelf back in elementary school, it showed me not just a girl who knew what I was going through, but the fantasy of a tangible place where she could be different and still belong. Mila and her podmates always knew she wasn't like them. She had fingers where they had flippers, but the dolphins didn't mind. They understood her needs were different from theirs and were happy to accommodate them by bringing her to islands to find fresh water, carrying her when she was too weak to swim, and being mindful of how deep it was safe for her to dive. They knew her inside and out. Can you imagine being known? I couldn't. If I was known, then I wouldn't have to be researched. How envious I was of the way neurotypical people can just pick up on one another's needs without a word, the way they wanted to soothe rather than silence their loved ones. Mila accommodates the dolphins in return. She uses her human hands for stroking dolphin backs, for holding and tearing and throwing and pulling, for detangling tails from nets and for declogging blowholes. Although I cannot stand on my tail or jump the waves, although I cannot catch the fish or slide in silence through the sea, although I cannot understand the fast voice or the deep stories, I am part of the long song. I cannot hear the whole sound, though it sinks through me. I sing my own funny, clicking, chirping, squeaking story, and the story is good. Good. The dolphins have raised Mila to know that she is good. Meanwhile, every time I stimmed to express happiness, an adult would swoop in and snap, "Stop that." Imagine for a moment that you are 4 years old, and every time you smile, a motion that occurs unconsciously whenever you're happy, someone scolds you. What do you think you learn? That your joy makes others uncomfortable? That you feel happiness wrong the same way you feel everything wrong? That by being happy, you are being bad, and from then on, every time you experience something that makes you feel like smiling, your joy should be drowned out by the fear of how you might be punished for it. I never had dolphins. Yes, the therapies I went through taught me ways to suppress my symptoms, but what's harder to visualize are the long-term traumas they've left me with. I was taught that communicating distress would only result in retaliation, that my feelings and life matter less than non-autistic people's, and that my needs should be ignored in favor of whatever is most convenient for the neurotypical people around me. With autistic people being raised to ignore our discomfort in favor of pleasing others and being taught that our pain does not count, is it really any surprise that roughly half of us are sexually abused as children? Studies have shown that suppressing symptoms makes autistic people more likely to have depression and suicidal ideation. 2 out of 3 autistic people consider suicide. 1 out of 3 of us attempt it. Yet society continues to prioritize us suppressing our symptoms over the side effects of what happen when we do. You cannot convince me that someone speaking in tones you recognize, holding eye contact with you, and keeping their body still is worth the price of their will to live. The next chapter begins with Mila in the hospital. Someone managed to drag her half-drowned from the river, but now she can barely breathe. Eventually, she is released and returns to her room at the research facility. One night, the janitor, Mr. Arredondo, sees her staring at him through the window of her door and is so startled by the sight of her that he shrieks and slips. Mila tries to open the door to go to the man, to help him. The door will not open. I beat my hands on the locked door. I beat my hands until my blood comes. Mila starts to slam her hands against every available surface. It wakes up Justin, who runs to get his mother. She bursts into the room, screaming, "What were you thinking?" at Mila as she stands there with her bleeding hands. I don't know what I am thinking, but I am alone. I am trapped in the net of the room. I am drowning in the net of humans. In my dolphin family, I was free. Now I have a locked door. Some autistic people stim in ways that can cause themselves harm. When done around others, it can be an attempt to communicate, a way of saying, "Hey, here's a visualization of the pain I'm feeling inside right now. This is the damage that this situation is causing me." The doctors recognize this is what Mila is doing, so they bring her an inflatable punching bag. Dr. Beck explains, when you feel angry or afraid, you can hit him. You don't have to hit the walls of your room. You don't have to hit the door or the windows. If you feel angry or afraid, you can hit him. Then no one is hurt. But Mila does not wish to hit a man filled with air. This will not make her free. If they'd only unlock the door, then she wouldn't want to hit anything. Sandy tries to explain. "Mila, you are government property." She responds, "No, I am Mila." Mila goes on strike. She refuses to work. She refuses to eat. They inject her with a feeding tube, a practice considered torture and a human rights violation by the United Nations, and have to tie her to the bed to keep her from ripping it out. It takes 9 days for the government to agree to even unlock the door of her room, but every other one in the house remains sealed. For any experiment or study to be considered ethical, you are supposed to have the right to be able to leave it at any time, unless you are a minor or disabled. I was both. Then it is your legal guardian who is consulted. The government is Mila's guardian. It will never let her stop. Its explicit goal, as stated in the article that opens the book, is to stimulate a human response in Mila. But who are they to deem what counts as human? Any response of hers should inherently be human because she is one. So are autistic people, but we too have had our humanity and the rights that are supposed to come with it denied us. Contemporary psychologists have even called autism a disorder in being human. Mila describes herself as not human. Not human enough. Sandy and Dr. Beck try to convince Mila that everything they do is for her safety. They tell her that when humans encounter something they don't understand, they get aggressive. If Mila went into the world the way she is now, she'd only be in danger. The same explanation was given to me throughout my childhood. Simply being autistic was enough to make others abhor me, so I had to hide it to protect myself from their negative reactions. But why was it me being held accountable for failing to suppress my symptoms, rather than others for failing to suppress their intolerance? To many minds, curing disabilities is a greater priority than curing the prejudice against people with disabilities. But for many of us, a cure either isn't wanted or isn't feasible. While yes, many of our conditions would continue to impede us, even if we had societal support, the lack of it only adds to our problems. Sandy says the more people know of you, the less fear they will have. But what do people know of me? Only pictures on the television, only words. I am a thing to look at, to play with, not a thing to touch and care for. My autism is a part of me, but it isn't all of me. When I share my diagnosis with people I'm only just getting to know, sometimes I feel like it's the only thing they see me as. They ask me questions about my condition, but not about me. Sandy says, "It isn't just the way you look. Your thinking is different. Mila, you think like a dolphin. When humans look at the dolphin, they think it does not look human. It does not talk human, it does not act human. It must not be as good as human. Humans think that they know the only right way. I know only this thing. I must have the door unlocked." Sandy promises that all of them will be, once Mila has learned to behave the way the government wants. Mila assumes then that that will be the end of it. That if she can just pass enough of their tests, then they'll let her go. And she can run back to the warm sea where she can leave her human clothes and thaw on the beach. I will work very hard at being human, so they'll let me go free. But these therapies never truly end. When my parents started introducing rules I used to only have to follow at schools or the doctors into our home, they framed it as practice, and so I worked even harder than ever before so I could earn back the right to let my walls down again. By the time their supervision had subsided, the walls were stuck. There was a period in my life where stimming no longer came naturally to me. Whenever I tried to do it and reclaim the emotional release that had once come with it, all I could feel was guilt for doing something purposefully that I knew everyone wanted me to stop. Mila goes to Justin and asks him, "What if they keep me locked here forever? What if I do all your mother asks and I am still not good enough?" Justin answers, "You're already good enough. You can do so much more than anyone ever thought. But they don't know when to stop. Nothing can make her happy." The right to be openly autistic had never been intended as something I could earn back. The goal had always been to keep me from wanting that right by conditioning me to carry the same negative attitudes towards autism that society had. When Mila is shown footage of herself from when she was found, she reacts with shame. She thinks, "This is a bad girl. A girl with no clothes, a girl with long wild hair, a girl with eyes showing white. This girl has fear. I am happy not to be that girl. But I am that girl." It's hard for me to watch videos of myself from when I was younger. We all cringe at our pasts, but I outright flinch at every squeak and slip up. And then I hate my current self for doing so, as if that will make up for having ever hated the old one. Mila coaxes Shay into playing with the recorder again, but now, when Shay blows into it without rhyme or reason, the way Mila herself once did, Mila is frightened by how much it angers her. When I first came, I was so close to Shay. Together, we were different from the others. We were a pod of two. But now Shay is left behind. If to be human means I can no longer hear the good, rough music of Shay, then finally I am human. Shay looks at me the way a solitary dolphin looks at a shark. Have I become one of the sharks? In an act of what might be rage, might be rebellion, might be desperation, Shay breaks Mila's recorder in two. In doing so, she breaks what little remains of Mila as well. Unfortunately, within the autistic community, many individuals take out their internalized ableism and insecurities on others, policing people's behaviors and accusing those who meet even less societal norms than they do of being the reason that autistic people are looked down upon. I've had other autistic people call me bad representation that reinforces stereotypes, as if I were a fictional character based on such stereotypes and not an actual human being who's developed certain traits due to their experiences. For many of these people, the source of their anger isn't the mistreatment of disabled people, but rather the fact that they are being treated like disabled people. They don't want the stigma that comes with being viewed as disabled, so they attempt to distance themselves from the label, which then only reinforces the negative connotations surrounding it for the rest of us. Just like Mila, sometimes I am horrified to find a flash of resentment stirring within me when another disabled person does something atypical. It usually happens if the action is something I'm used to being punished for. Reflecting on these moments, I've realized that this emotion is mostly envy. It's the question, how come people can accept them for doing this when I was always punished? These moments remind me that others can accept autistic people without us needing to change. Meaning that every time I'd been mistreated for being autistic, it hadn't been inevitable or warranted. It had been a conscious choice that I have the right to hold others accountable for. Before Mila can mend their relationship, the government decides to send Shay away. Before Shay came to the facility, she lived a life locked in and alone. But she did not know. Now she knows. From now on, whenever she is neglected or denied, it will sting all the worse because she'll know there is another way things can be, but that others have deemed her undeserving of it. It is too late for her to go back to what she was. When Justin asks Mila, "All those years, how did you do it?" she answers, "It was not hard. I did not know another thing to do." But now she does. Now we do. Now it is all we know. Most of this video has been analyzing the music of Dolphins through a lens of disability, but it would be negligent not to discuss how race and ethnicity impact the way characters are treated. Mila is explicitly described as having brown skin and remembers her Afro-Cuban grandfather telling her stories about their heritage. The researchers realize Mila was once a girl named Olivia, who everyone thought had died in an aquatic plane crash along with her mother when they were sent from Cuba. The wording "sent from" always stood out to me, for it implies someone else is telling you to go. The Music of Dolphins was published in 1996, and assuming it takes place around that time, Mila and her mother would have been sent from Cuba in the early to mid-80s. During the 80s, there was a massive exodus of Cuban refugees, which the Coast Guard is shown searching for in the book's prologue when they end up finding Mila instead. When Mila's Cuban father, who hadn't been on the plane, finds out she still lives, he wants to see her again. But the Cuban and American governments refuse to let them reunite. The United States has a long, reprehensible history of stealing children of color from their families and attempting to strip them of their culture. We've seen this historically in the slave trade, in Native American boarding schools, and we continue to see it in the foster care system and at the US-Mexico border. Communities of color have also experienced horrific medical exploitation at the hands of American scientists, where their consent, humanity, and health have all been squandered. While reading Mila's narrative as an allegory for autism requires some interpretation, no matter how you try to spin it, The Music of Dolphins is a story about an Afro-Latina child being abducted from her family by the US government, medically abused, taught the culture she was raised in is inferior, and forced to assimilate to white American standards. I don't have the experiences necessary to cover The Music of Dolphins from an Afro-Latina perspective with the same depth and emotion that I can provide an autistic one. But the beautiful thing about textual analysis is the sheer variety of ways that we can all approach the same source. That is to say, I'd love to hear in the comments section how Mila's story resonates with you, along with connections you've made and anything you have to add to the conversation. There are scenes and relationships in this book that I'd love to discuss further, but which simply aren't relevant to the topic of this video. For example, one of my favorite dynamics in the book is the one that Mila eventually forms with Justin. When she thinks of Justin, she thinks maybe it is not so important to return to her dolphin family, that she can stay with humans always. But she knows that while he might accept her, not everyone will. To him, she confesses, "I want to go back to the sea where I don't feel the crushing of my heart by the ideas in my head. But if I do go back, Justin, I am the dolphin girl, the girl you laugh at." But Justin doesn't laugh. He does not tell her what to do like Sandy or Dr. Beck. He does not treat her the way the doctors do. He does not look another place when she says something he does not like. He listens. Justin, too, is different. He is quiet, he guards his emotions, he hates being touched, and he doesn't trust others. With this human, Mila is most happy. With this human, Mila is most sad. Mila tells him, "You would make a very good dolphin, Justin Beck. And you would make a very good human. But I am too weak. Too weak to make anything." Mila cannot bring herself to eat anymore. She cannot change what is happening, but their feeding tube cannot stop what is happening. Dr. Beck keeps bringing Mila new recorders, begging her to try them, but it doesn't matter. Her music is fading. Everything is fading. She starts forgetting words. The sentences she writes are getting shorter. Dr. Beck reassures her that she just needs to practice more. But pleasing Dr. Beck is no longer one of Mila's priorities. All she wants is to go home. Dr. Beck says, "Mila, I know you hurt now, but it will not always hurt this way. Being human gets better, I promise. If I let you go, I will go to prison." Mila stares her down. "I'm already in prison." Mila has a nightmare where her dolphins have been beached. One by one, she drags them back into the water, but they do not wait for her. They do not recognize her. She's no longer one of them. Justin asks her, "What makes a whale beach itself?" "Are you beaching yourself, Mila?" I don't know how The Music of Dolphins ends. Don't get me wrong, I've read it all the way through multiple times, over and over, but every time I do, I have a different interpretation. Here's what Mila describes. Her health is rapidly deteriorating. The chapters she writes are now rarely more than 3 paragraphs long. Dr. Beck hopes that getting to see the ocean will reinvigorate her, so Dr. Beck, Sandy, Mila, and Justin all go on a boat trip. By some miracle, Mila spots her dolphins and begs Dr. Beck to give her to the water. The doctor refuses, but Justin says he will, and the chapter ends with him hugging her before cutting to an epilogue where Mila is once again fully integrated among the dolphins, her life among humans now a mere memory that's already sinking beneath the waves. As a child, I considered this a happy ending. Mila is reunited with her family and freed from her shackles. But when I reread this book my freshman year, it just felt too good to be true. It felt like a dream, a fantasy, a delusion. How did a boat from Boston encounter dolphins from Cuba? You're telling me that the government, who locked every door in the house just to keep Mila from the Charles River, would let her go out on the open ocean? Why is it that when Justin says he'll give her to the water, he grabs onto her rather than letting her go? Why does she need someone else to give her in the first place? Why can't she give herself? How reliable of a narrator is Mila at this point? The last 2 times I've reread The Music of Dolphins, I haven't cared if the ending was impractical, because the whole book is. It's about a girl raised by dolphins. If I can suspend my disbelief for the first few chapters, why not for the final ones? Perhaps it's because every time I read The Music of Dolphins, I'm rereading my own life story. I'm rereading a girl making noises, a girl being researched, a girl feeling isolated, and then a girl feeling nothing at all. For a while there, I couldn't imagine anything coming after the feeling nothing at all. I could only accept miracles when they happened to a child who still had the capacity to believe in them. Since then, a couple of years have passed. I've been working on reclaiming my autism and can now instinctively stim again without shame. I still participate in autism studies, but this time by choice, and am involved in making them more ethical rather than exploitative. The studies I participate in now aren't trying to change us, only to measure what's already there so others can be educated. I'm a member of 2 all-autistic game development teams and participate in disability affinity spaces. I'm in clubs that pertain to my special interests, have friends I take turns info dumping with, and have surrounded myself with folks who appreciate my autism rather than want to control it. My trauma and experiences with anti-autistic bias certainly haven't ended, but they're easier for me to recognize, carry, and fight back against. I've been able to salvage parts of myself that I'd thought I'd lost forever, and gain ones that I'd never known I could have. I don't want it to sound like my life is suddenly perfect, though. It certainly isn't. But it's definitely better than what it was, and I'm hoping to continue improving it. To be honest, I haven't yet found a community that matches Mila's dolphins, but I'm hoping to build one. Thank you so much for spending time with this video, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to keep being recommended similar videos, and if you want to support me in creating more of this kind of content, then check out the Patreon I've linked in the description. Pledging gets you access to behind-the-scenes content, director's commentaries, things that were cut for time, and sneak peeks at future videos. Hope you all have a great day!